What's up, DGens? I'm back with my video for the week after another shitty week. It happens, man. You hit these cold streaks, they're gonna come. Hopefully they're not hitting you right now. But if they're not, just know what happens. Thank you guys for reaching out because I've had a couple people kind of reach out like, "Hey, man, are you okay?" Like suicide watch. Like, I'm fine. I get it. We're not gonna win every week. Shit happens. It sucks, because you put in a lot of time, put in a lot of effort. I'm putting in models and numbers and all that kind of crap, reading books, and you're still not getting the results you want. So it sucks. It does feel like you're kind of running up against a brick wall to a certain extent, but you just kind of have to know how to handle these cool streaks. And really, the best advice, or some of the best advice I've ever gotten regarding gambling, is that obviously know when to walk away, but more importantly, when you're having these cold streaks, you're not really gonna walk away from it all. That doesn't help situations. Sometimes if it's like, maybe you're pressing too hard, or maybe it's like you're putting too much emphasis on one week or something, yeah, maybe at that point you can walk away, or like one team. But overall, there's not really a lot of situations in life where you're like, man, this shit sucks. Let me stop paying attention to it for a week or 2 weeks or however long, and then come back later and I'll magically be better at it. Like, that's not really how it works. So with gambling, you're not going to stop betting. You're just going to reduce the amount that you're betting. I am personally reducing my picks and kind of how many games I'm playing, how many games I'm getting invested in, and I've not reduced my unit size yet, but that would be the next step. So if you're like, 1 week, bad week, okay, let's just go a little bit slower next week. Second bad week in a row, all right, now we're going to drop the amount of plays that we're putting out there. Another bad week in a row, okay, now we're going to go down in unit size. Maybe we're doing half a unit or something like that. And you're just kind of slow playing it until you're seeing the field clearly. And that's really what this is. I don't know how many of you get invested in like the stock market and things like that. I know I dabble in that. It's actually part of my actual 9 to 5 profession, and that's kind of what I'm assuming a lot of you are at least interested in. And it's very similar to the stock market, right? Like when you're seeing things clearly and you kind of know what's coming up and you got your hand, your finger on the pulse, it's a lot easier to just know what's going on, hit your strides, and get your wins when you can. So that's what we're going to be doing this week. As far as the games from last week, we can go over them just real quick. But really, so we went 1-1-2. 1-2-1. So the push was the Texans. It was Texans +3, and that one was just. I don't want to say it was a bad beat because it wasn't. It was very expected of the Texans, but just the way that you had your heart ripped out of this thing, man, because it was Texans +3. The whole game, it was a relatively close game, low scoring, pretty much everything we thought. Texans did come out slinging it around on the first downs, again going very according to script, and then they get the ball, they're tied, and you're thinking okay, they might not get to score here, but if anything they'll get the tie. We'll go to overtime, see what happens. Nope, don't even get that. You don't get the benefit of the doubt there. And in the back of my head, I was even thinking, you know what? Damn, this might just end up as a tie. Even when they go to overtime, I wasn't thinking either team was going to score again, because it could just be in a tie, or maybe a safety on something weird. But anyways, you don't even get that. As Davis Mills goes out there, he throws incompletion, then he throws a pick, and they put the Bears on the 15-yard line or some shit like that. Basically, they just kneel the ball out twice and kick the field goal, get out of there. So we get the push. In that particular situation, it just sucked because you were you could see it coming. You could see you're hey, they, should get a win here, or at least in a position to get a win, and it just flipped on a light switch. The other one is one of the losses that was just so aggravating. Because again, this one a little bit different, as in it should have been a push. So last week I had the Steelers +6 against the Browns, and the whole game they're covering that spread, and they come to the fourth quarter, They finally go down by 6, and really you're hoping, because they're down by 3. The Browns go up and kick a field goal. And you're like, oh, shit, okay, well, at least we got the push. It's like 2 minutes left or whatever. And Steelers actually got the ball a couple times after they were, got down by 6. But Trubisky just wasn't going to do a damn thing and knew it. And so you're like, all right, well, maybe, we just get the push, get out of here. Of course, they had the ball with the last fucking second on the clock. And what do? They try to do the shitty, flea flicker, lateral bull crap with the last 2 or 3 seconds on the clock. And I saw it coming. I knew it. I was sitting on my couch and I was like, these assholes are going to just fuck me right out of this. And of course, that's what happens on their own 8-yard line. They try to lateral it backwards. It's clear it's not working. The ball goes to the floor, and then not only do the Browns recover it, but they don't immediately just jump on it. The ball's squirting around everywhere, and it gets into the damn end zone, and they land on it, and they get this shitty bullshit defensive touchdown at the very last second of the game to make your push go from what was initially a cover for 95% of that game to a push for the last 2 to 3 minutes of that game to you lost in the last 2 seconds of the game. And that was just so aggravating. It was one of the worst. But anyways, so that weird, shitty losses. I feel like this is the second week in a row where it's just been a lot of weird stuff that goes on throughout the week. And as far as the games are concerned, and so a lot of these losses, it sucks. Obviously, you don't want to lose, but it's almost kind of you have to look at it in awe of what are the odds that we lose, and not just lose. It's one thing if you're just on the wrong side of the game. I get that, I understand that, but to be on the wrong side and just or be on the just be on the right side, I guess, and then lose in these fluky 1 in a million, they could play this game 10 more times and that would not happen again kind of ways. It's something else. The other loss on the week was the Giants and the Cowboys. That one was not so bad because that was more of just a wrong side, and that happens too, obviously, and that sucked. I really did think that the Giants, or at least Dayball, was going to have a better plan of attack to get after the Cowboys, and I think that the game plan was not terrible, although he didn't take advantage of a lot of the spots that I thought he was going to. Cowboys have a lot of weaknesses in the middle of the field on defense. If you can pass behind that really good offensive line, not to the side of it. I don't know why everybody tries to do that crap, and the Bengals especially try to pass sideways. If you actually pass down the field on the Cowboys, they have a hard time covering that. I don't know what it is about that defense. They have a very hard time covering crosser routes, and I think you're gonna see a team get behind those linebackers and in front of the safeties and put them in a really bad spot. It's gonna just take the team that has both the weapons to do it and the coach to take advantage of it. The other thing was the Giants, they don't use Kadarius Toney very much, but he was out. Wan'Dale Robinson's still out of the lineup. So I think those two guys could have made some sort of difference. At the end of the day, it just didn't really matter. They took the loss. Shit happens, divisional game. One thing I did want to mention on that, though, because not that just that game, but last week we did see a lot of divisional games in general. Kind of keep some of those in mind, because as we move forward throughout the season, when they come up for their second matchup, a lot of those games, including this Cowboys-Giants game, you should see a lot higher scoring the second time around. A lot of these games, and you've probably heard it all over the place if you're listening to podcasts or YouTube channels or whatever, the scoring in the NFL this year is very low, and on top of that, the margin in these games is very low. Usually we have a pretty good chunk of games that are decided by 7 to 13 points. It's usually around 28-30% of games, or 35% of games sometimes, depending on what year you're talking about. And this year it's just lower. the amount of blowouts is also lower. You're seeing like one blowout a week, maybe two, where we used to have like four of them a week. So I think some of that is COVID related. I think, in like 2020 when there was weird restrictions on practice and stuff like that, the teams that were very good and had very good players and very good coaches, obviously, were able to kind of overcome those obstacles, where the teams that were bad, they just had all of their deficiencies kind of highlighted by the lack of practices and things like that. So a lot more blowouts, and now you're not seeing those blowouts as much because you're not seeing the deficiencies. So that makes sense. At least that's my hypothesis on it. So those are the losses. Those are the pushes. As far as the win for the week, it was the Saints and the Panthers. That one was a pretty sweat-free win, actually. The Panthers got out to an early lead. I think it was like 10-0, and never really looked back. One thing that, and I cannot remember if I've mentioned it on the channel or not, but before the season started, the Saints and the Buccaneers were two teams that I just didn't really believe in. I think I may have mentioned it for the Saints at least at some point, whether it was preseason or first week or whatever. I just didn't really believe in them a lot, and mainly it was because their coach is not just, this is his first year actually coaching the Saints, but his prior coaching history is not that great. I think he's like 4-12 the last time he was a coach, and that may have been like his best year. Just not a whole lot to write home about with that coach, and you're seeing it now. Yeah, there's been some injuries, and they're dealing, with some of these things, but even when they were healthy, they're just not like a big offensive juggernaut. And while their defense is okay, it's not good enough to try and rely on, keeping teams under like 14 points to win a game. It's a really hard sell with those guys. I know in the offseason, a lot of people were talking them up, and I guess just really excited at the prospect of that team. I really didn't see it, and you've probably noticed I haven't bet anything on the Saints this year at all. I do think that they're still a little overrated because they're a hard team to like pin down and figure out because they always have so many moving pieces. But that's a team that I'd be looking to fade. And anyways, the Panthers beat them last week, so again, pretty sweat-free. That one went very much to schedule. No real big surprises there. One thing I have learned about my own algorithms and things like that is that the Madden algorithm, it worked great the first 2 weeks. I think that the total record was 19-13, so well above 500. But I've kind of narrowed down the games or the teams that it works very well with, and there was, I believe, 6 teams as of the end of last week or the last week's games where it was 3-0. So those are the teams that I wanted to focus in on and kind of use that as a starting point to pick a game for this week. And again, keep in mind, I'm only picking like 1, possibly 2 games this week. But one of those teams is the Broncos, and just overall, the Madden algorithm was much, much better when you're using it for teams that are lower scoring. So that's one thing that I want to keep in mind for next year. And if any of you guys are still following next year, still paying attention to the channel, please remind me, because I have spreadsheets because I can't remember shit. So remind me that that's what the Madden algorithm is best at, and it's pretty simple to explain. It's just a lower variance rate. So if you have a team that's super high scoring, you have a team like the Bills or the Ravens who are going to go out there and they can put up 44 points or whatever, that's great, and that gives us a lot of confidence in their players and things. But it's really hard to handicap that because there's so many touchdowns. Each touchdown is a variance, and each drive at that point becomes a pretty high variable because it could be 7-3 or 0, whereas a lower scoring team, for the most part, we realize that most of their drives are going to be 0, maybe 3s, depending on who you're talking about. And so they're a little bit easier to predict as far as like scoring patterns and things like that are concerned. And so a lot of these lower scoring teams, when they're playing against each other, again, makes it easier for the algorithm as far as the Madden algorithm is concerned. That's why teams like the Broncos were 3-0 in the algorithm. So for that reason, we're going to start off with the pick. I should say fucking middle of the damn video. It's 15 minutes already. Broncos plus the I'm actually going to get +3. I'm buying the hook to the key number. You already know me if you paid attention to any of these videos. I'm going to buy it to the 3. You're getting at -135 at a few different books, but the one that I am personally going to be using for this particular play is actually xbet.com. So that I'll put that out there as well. But they have it at the -135 at the +3. So as far as the Madden algorithm is concerned, if you haven't seen through this algorithm, and I've showed it a couple times, but if this is the first time you're looking at it or you're brand new to the videos, I just want to explain it real quick because this is probably the last week that we're really going to use this a whole lot. Moving forward, it's going to be more of just like reference material. But this Madden algorithm takes into account the caliber of players that are on each team, and it basically just assigns them a coefficient and how probable that coefficient is, meaning that we think, the quarterbacks are worth about 0.23 points per rating score, as well as the probability is pretty high that the quarterback is going to come into play, that they're going to account for something as far as scoring or some sort of outcome for the game. Whereas a difference in like a defensive ranking, we're going to put that at 0.66 because it could be a lot more, but it's just a little bit less likely that it's going to come into play. So that's kind of how this works. It's just a bunch of math in here. It's I pretty much have it down to a template. You just kind of pre-fill it. If anybody wants it, it's free. Like I said, the first 2 weeks are really good. Last week it was 7, 8, and 1, so not as good. Pretty much still like a 50-50 rate. And I've been saying that since the beginning of the off season. The Madden algorithm really does its best work the first 4 weeks of the season, and then by week 6, you really don't want to be using it as your main, handicapping tool. It's just kind of like a reference material at that point moving forward. And the other thing is you have to keep up with all the players, all the teams, all that stuff as far as injuries and health is concerned. So to kind of narrow that down and to use only the good information that we're getting from this and kind of start whittling away from this, we are using, like I said, the 6 teams that it is 3-0 with. Again, one of those being the Broncos. So the Broncos, per the algorithm, should really be more of like a 1.5 of a dog. For this particular game, I'm giving the Raiders only a 1 point of a home field advantage, where it's usually a 1.5. Raiders haven't really shown to have a great home field advantage since they moved to Vegas. I thought that maybe that they were going to have a bigger advantage, but just the way the NFL is structured, it doesn't really give the opponents a lot of time to go party and get crazy, so they don't really have much of that home field going for them. They're kind of like strangers in their own home field because people who live in Vegas are not really diehard Raiders fans for the most part. You'll get some travelers obviously in from Oakland and LA and things like that, but it's just not the same as when they were actually playing in Oakland. So I'm only giving them a point. Even if you wanted to give them 1.5, that would put them at about 1.8 of a spread. So I'm just kind of splitting the difference and saying that it should be a 1.5 is what the spread should be. Even if you wanted to round that up and say that they should be a 2, it's still, you're still getting some value because it's currently at 2.5. So even if you just took the 2.5, you didn't buy the extra hook, you're still getting about a half a point, a little bit more of value. Like I said, I'm buying the hook because the 3 is a key number. It's pretty vital, and like I said earlier, fewer and fewer games are being decided by big margins. Everything has been pretty close. I believe it's something like almost 50% of the games are decided by a touchdown or less, as far as the games that have taken place so far. So something to keep in mind there as well. So that's why I'm buying the hook to get to the 3. So that's just one piece of the handicapping algorithm for this week, though. So like I said, because the Madden algorithm is becoming less and less effective, we're going to start jumping over to this, which is our coaching grading algorithm or model. So a couple of things on this one, and I'm sorry for all the math guys and all the information, but it doesn't hurt to just kind of give you some insight. Y'all let me know if you think anything needs to be changed. Like I said, if you want a copy of this, and or if you personally would change something different on this, because this particular model, usually I use it with early down success rate, and that's one of the key factors in making this model. The problem with that is that the sites that I have been getting that from, which previously was just sharpfootballstats.com, are no longer providing that data. They're not updating it, or it has not been updated right now. I've reached out, I've asked all that kind of stuff, and they don't reply. So I'm assuming that they don't have any real date on which they're going to update this. Sharpfootballanalysis.com does have success rate and data and all that kind of stuff, but it's from last year. And all of the pages on the website that refer back to that data all say basically that it's only going to provide last year's information. And I'm not sure if they're doing that because they sell more books that way in the off season or what, but it really sucks because that's like a really key piece of data. Now I have been able to kind of piece together success rates and find it in other areas, so it's a lot more legwork. So just keep that in mind, because if you're watching these videos, I hope that you're just taking advantage of what's all being here provided, because it is a pain in the ass to keep this thing updated. A lot of it can be updated, and I'm doing the most that I can with that technology, but at the end of the day, a lot of this still needs to be entered by hand. A lot of this still needs to be just worked with and kind of filtered through and things like that, and tracked as well. So what's in here now instead of the early down success rate? So it's DVOA, which is a big one, defensive DVOA obviously, and then we do still have success rate. This is also from a different website, but this is not just early down, this is just general success rate, so we have to kind of filter that. EPA, so expected points added per play, and then pass rate on first down is also being taken into account for this one. So pass rate previously wasn't really taken into account because it was kind of included in early down success rate. I personally believe, and I think this has kind of been proven out through just stats and things like that, passing is of course the more efficient way to move the ball. So we're going to give just a little bit of a lean to the teams who are willing to pass on first down and not wait till third and long in an obvious passing situation. So like in this case, I'm just going to use these as an example. Let's see who this is. I'm assuming it's the Bears. But yeah, so the Bears, who are passing on first down at a 26% pass rate, versus the Cardinals, who are passing at a 58% pass rate on first down, we're going to give the Cardinals about a 0.3% jump in their expected points, or in their grade, that is. So it all comes down to kind of what you want to include in here or what you don't, but that's something that I do tend to rely on, because it's been not scientifically proven out, just because it's hard to do that. It's unreliable. It's football, right? Small sample sizes, but having a team that's going to pass on first down typically leads to more success, more first downs, more time possession, and all that kind of stuff. So that's why it's in here. The expected points added and success rate obviously kind of speaks for itself. And what else are we doing with this algorithm or with this data and stats? Just really one of the main things here is being able to just easily compare some information. So for example, top passing rates, I just took the top 10 and I kind of filtered it out. So we take the top 10 passing rates, we take the top 10 passing defenses, and then we can see the ones that are actually playing against each other. So for the top 10 on each of these categories, there's only 3 teams that play against each other, or 3 games where this is going to come into play. One of them is the Broncos game. So the Raiders actually pass at about a 71% rate. Now the Broncos are top 10 passing defense, and per DVOA have a negative 26% rating on there, meaning that they're keeping teams to basically below what their average is when it comes to expected points and expected yards and things like that. So another just kind of nod to the Broncos in that particular area. So we have all that information there. We're also going to filter this with strength of schedule. So a team that's been playing a really, really tough strength of schedule is obviously going to have a little bit more of an advantage in the grading algorithm here compared to a team that's had, a really weak schedule, that's played somebody who's, like 0-3 or whatever. So that's kind of all that's in here. A lot of the stuff has stayed the same as far as just like how are we actually getting the grade. It's just kind of a change of titles and a change of data that we're using. QBR is obviously still very important. One other thing that we can look at here, like I said, when it comes to like just a quick and easy comparison, is this adjusted sack rate. This is something, if you're not already watching like Pat Mayo I don't know where you've been, but Mayo Media, he puts everything out there: football, MMA, basketball, all that kind of stuff. But one of the things that he always kind of harps on, and that I've just kind of picked up over the years, is that he loves to work with defenses for fantasy, and he uses these two stats and kind of deciding who he's going to play. So I just heard him out, and I've kind of pieced it together and what he's doing. And then with DVOA this year, they've actually made it really, really easy. So you can come in here and look at who has the highest adjusted sack rate as far as offense. So like in this case, the 18.1 is also the Bears. So they're giving up about 18% of the time they're giving up a sack when like in this case, Justin Fields drops back. They're going to be playing against the Giants. So let's take a look and see what the Giants are doing as far as sacks are concerned. They get a sack about 3.5% of the time when the team drops back. So we would expect this number to be a little bit lower because the Giants are not getting too much pressure, but we would expect the Giants to have a few more sacks than they usually do or than they have this season. Now, one thing that this does not take into account for is, of course, people who are coming back off of injuries and things like that. Last week, the Giants had a couple players come back off of injury. They weren't really looking too hot against the Cowboys, but players like Thibodeau could look much better going up against the Bears, getting some pressure on Justin Fields, getting a few sacks. So these numbers are going to obviously change every week, but it is something just a quick and easy little scale to look at and see what teams may stand out to us, may have a big advantage in one item or another, and kind of just help us with our handicapping. But anyways, all of those points and all this data goes into a grade. That grade then spits out expected points. The expected points is going to be pretty similar to the grade, but we are going to give them like a 5% chance of basically like players outperforming what the coach is giving them. So that's how the expected points are critiqued, or how they're kind of mathematically put together. So all of that is really just an excuse to say the Broncos, per my algorithm, should be at about 21 to 22 points, whereas the Raiders are at about 14 to 15 points. Now, last note on this algorithm, because I know it's a lot of math, is that one standard deviation is 7 points. The standard deviation for this is important because this is basically like the tippy top of the bell curve, right? So if you're looking at the bell curve, 22 for the Broncos would be right smack in the middle, meaning that on any given week, within one deviation down or up, we would expect to find the Broncos there, meaning that we should expect them, and if we round this to a more even football number, which would be 21, we would expect the Broncos to be within either 14 or 28 points, and we kind of adjust to whatever team they're playing and the team itself. So in this case, I'm really not expecting the Raiders to go out and do too much as far as defensive stops and things like that. So I would say I'm expecting the Broncos to get about 20 points, whereas the Raiders, on the other hand, their middle of the bell curve is about 15. I do expect the Broncos defense to step up a little bit because this is going to be one of the tougher defenses that the Raiders have played this year. So I would expect the Raiders to score more like 10 points in this game, 10 to 13 really. So my expectations is to have this game at about a 20 to 10 kind of game, maybe like 17 to 10, 17 13, somewhere in there. So it's also good for totals because we can kind of have an expectation. But obviously, like in this case, we're using it for the sides. So even if I were off, even if the Raiders perform above expectation and they're on the plus side of their standard deviation, we would still expect this game to be something like 21 to 20, 21 to 17, 20 to 17, somewhere in there, to where we're going to get those 3 points in our favor with the Broncos to make it either a push or possibly a win. But most likely, again, per the algorithm, we're expecting the Broncos to just outright win this game. So, like I said, lots of different factors in this one as far as like the algorithms that have gone by that I've put into this. Madden algorithms, grading algorithms, just looking at sack rates, pressure rates, DVOA, all that kind of stuff. Everything is pointing the Broncos' direction. The Broncos last week, if you didn't hear, they also added like an offensive, offensive guru to help out with Nathaniel Hackett. Hackett obviously is a first-time head coach. And I think he kind of needed that. I think he was getting a little overwhelmed with what was going on, making decisions down the stretch and things like that. Now, I don't know too much about this like offensive mind that they came in to help him, but last week I thought maybe you'd see a little bit of a jump in the offense, and you really didn't get too much. But I do think that was just kind of like a feeling out process. It's the first game, kind of trying to get down what's going on and what he can do to help and all that kind of stuff. So I would expect to see the Broncos get a little bit more aggressive, a little bit more efficient, and just become a better offense overall as we continue moving forward. They're definitely making a concerted effort to put the people in place to help the team become better. So they're at least doing something. They're not just sitting there and saying like, yeah, we know he sucks, we're not going to help him. Like, they're doing something. So again, for all of these reasons, I'm taking the Broncos plus the 3. That's really my pick for the week. If you want to lock one in, best bet, whatever, that's what it's going to be. The other pick that I like, I haven't pulled the trigger on, and to be completely honest with you, I'm waiting to see how this first game goes out. If this Broncos game just goes sideways and it's like not at all what we're expecting, and everything I just said just flies out the fucking window, probably not touching the second game. But if we get the win, especially if it's a comfortable win, and the rest of the games kind of go according to like the algorithms and numbers and all that kind of stuff, and it looks like we're seeing the field a little bit clearer, I will probably put a half a unit on this second play, and that's actually going to be the Chiefs versus the Buccaneers. So the Chiefs right now, per this algorithm, have 34 points is what their expected output should be. The Buccaneers are down at 21. A couple reasons for that, but the main one is going to be just like offensive DVOA and offensive efficiency. So in general, this first line here is the DVOA. The Buccaneers are down at negative 14. Now their defensive DVOA is awesome at 34.3. That means that they're stopping teams, and they're not letting them do what they want, basically. So that's really good. But the offensive side of the ball has just been terrible. Now I understand the Buccaneers have had some injury issues, and Mike Evans was suspended and all that kind of stuff. But even the first game of the season did not look very good for this team. And I think I had said this, or I know I had said this in the preseason, I don't like Todd Bowles as an offensive coordinator. My thought was that Tom Brady would be good enough to just kind of like basically outplay the coach. And they've been able to get some wins, but I haven't seen anything that tells me that Tom Brady is going to be able to keep this boat going, kind of in spite of Bowles instead of, with him. Whereas the Chiefs, Andy Reid and Patrick Mahomes, yeah, they don't look like the Chiefs, from 2019 or 20 or whatever it was, but the team is still really good. They're still kind of figuring it out because they have, they don't have Tyreek Hill. There's some new guys in there, some new schemes. They're worrying about, how teams are going to play them. To me, the Chiefs, it's got to be one of the harder positions or one of the harder teams to coach, because it's so hard to just do what you want to do, because you basically have to be aware that every team out there knows what you want to do, and they know that you're kind of like a one-trick pony at this point, and that's what they're going to take away from you. So, what do? You got to change it up, and then if they don't adjust, or they don't come out playing the defense you're expecting, then you got to adjust again, and trying to prepare for that within a week, having a plan A, B, C, D, and E within 7 days is pretty damn hard. Now, if you can do that, within a bye week or whatever, obviously that's much better, which kind of speaks to why Andy Reid is so good with some extra time to prepare. But you doing that week in, week out gets really difficult. That all being said, though, their offensive DVOA is a positive, and it's 13. Their defensive DVOA is 10, so not terrible at all. It's still, it's pretty decent. Now, you know what? I'm sorry. One last thing before I keep talking about this Chiefs game. On the Broncos, I just wanted to mention, they are 2 of 3 when it comes to one score game. So that means that, they've won 2 games, they lost 1 game, where it was a 1 score, with margin, basically. So they know how to win. It's about 66% as far as their win rate is concerned. And let me just look at the one other thing here. So 67% if you want to round up about it. The Raiders are 0 of 3 which to me, I know that seems like maybe it's just luck, right? Maybe the ball's bouncing the wrong way. But to me, that speaks a lot about coaching. The coach knowing how to win these very tight games. And in a game where the spread is 3 or 2.5, and we're expecting it to be a very close, tight game, that is huge. Having the coach or the coaching staff and the players as well who know how to handle that, who know what they need to do in these critical times and possessions and things like that. Even just little stuff like laying on the right person or handing the ball to the ref, not like tossing it to him and making him work to get the ball down so that you can run the next play. All that kind of stuff comes into play, and if the team is doing it right the majority of the time, which the Broncos, all 3 of their games have been 1-score games, are showing us, and they've been pretty tight throughout. Whereas the Raiders, all 3 of their games have also been 1-score games. They've lost all 3. But 2 of those games didn't even really look close for the most part. So, a little bit of a difference there, but definitely a difference in the outcome. So, sorry, just wanted to go back to that for a second. But lastly, on the Chiefs and the Buccaneers here, just having the difference in offense where the Chiefs know what they want to do, at least what their strength would be if the other team allows them to do it, and then kind of having to fall back to other plans is one thing, whereas the Buccaneers, they also know what they want to do, but it just has not been effective at all, and they've been allowed to do it. They want to run the ball, they want to use Fournette, and like I said, we know that they've been dealing with injuries, but they just have not really got the ball rolling in any one of these games. And the more concerning part is if you look at their strength of schedule, the Buccaneers are 20th, meaning that they haven't really had a tough strength of schedule. Let's take a look at just who they've played, and I can kind of tell you what I'm looking at here. So the Cowboys only put up 3 points on the Buccaneers. Again, not to their defense. But again, the Cowboys lost Dak partway through this game. And on top of that, the Cowboys offense, if you remember going back to week 1, most of everybody was fading this Cowboys offense because of the losses of all the different pieces, the loss of Amari Cooper, Zeke was being old and he's toast and all that kind of stuff. Everybody I knew was taking the under on the 10.5 wins by the Cowboys, and we're not surprised at all to see the Buccaneers get this win. We had money in this game. I know a couple of you guys had even mentioned to me before I put the money on it, like, hey, that's the game we want to take. Not a surprise there. The surprising part is the Buccaneers only scored 1 touchdown. Now, the Cowboys defense has looked good, but they also haven't really played a lot of great offenses. More importantly, the Buccaneers only put up 19 points in this game, and they got a win against a team that really, they should have at least had 1 additional touchdown in here, and that's pretty much with full health. Mike Evans was there. There's not a whole lot of excuses there. But let's give them the benefit of the doubt. They beat the Cowboys. Cowboys are currently 2-1 with Cooper Rush. Next, they go on to play the Saints. I was just saying, we never believed in the Saints. The Saints have a first-time head coach. The Saints have not put up a whole bunch of points themselves, and this game was really, really close pretty much the entire game until the middle of the fourth quarter. It was like 3-3 in the beginning of the third quarter, so didn't put up a lot of points there. Towards the end of the game, Mike Evans has his scuffle or whatever, he gets ejected, but again, not really a lot of excuses there. This game, and it doesn't look like a blowout, but it was even closer than the final score represents here. And the Saints just didn't really get a whole lot of pressure on defense. They did kind of a good job bottling up Fournette. That was about it. But again, another team that the Buccaneers beat that just are not really high in any of my rankings, and I don't see anything that makes us think the Saints are going to be some Super Bowl contender or like a big run in the playoff contender. Packers, Buccaneers, again, I know Mike Evans is not there or was not there for that game, but the Packers basically killed themselves in this game. I mean, they won, but it should have been an even more one-sided game. There was a fumble on the 1-yard line that I believe was Aaron Jones running in for the touchdown. Packers moved the ball up and down on them, and then fumbled it at the 1-yard line. And then again, a couple of possessions later, just a easy giveaway. They shanked a punt, missed a kick, all sorts of stuff that just did not go the Packers' way. So the Buccaneers, they lost, but it looks pretty close on the scoreboard, and it really should not have looked anywhere near this close. If the Packers score at least where they should have scored, meaning like the fumble on the 1 yard line and a couple other times here, or even if they're just kicking field goals, this game should have been at least 20-12 or 21-12 or more than that, really. But this game was not nearly as close as this score would have you believe. And that's, again, a Packers team that doesn't really have a whole lot of weapons. Romeo Doubs looked really good in this game. The Packers defense really kept Leonard Fournette in check, and that's a problem because the Packers have given up a lot of running backs, a lot of big days, even just this year. So to have them really shut down Leonard Fournette was a little bit of a surprise. I think he had like 30-something yards on like 20 runs or something ridiculous, but he just did not have a good day. Let me get you the exact numbers here. Yeah, 35 yards on 12 carries. So just nothing really good, and that's to say that he had a big run towards the end of the game. In the fourth quarter, he had like a 15-yard run. So it was even worse before that. And again, the Packers have not looked great against the run. So just a lot of red flags popping up there to me, and I know that a lot of people are out there. They're taking the Buccaneers plus the 1. People are betting on this like big offensive day to come from the Buccaneers. And Mike Evans is going to be back there this week. We've seen him play. It's not like this is the first game this season for him. And they just have not done anything to impress. They have not scored more than 20 points all season long. And again, throughout this game, they had scored 3 points through 3 quarters. Just nothing impressive from this Buccaneers offense. And the Chiefs defense, or Chiefs rush defense, is actually even better than we expected. Yeah, they lost last week against the Colts in a game that this is almost the exact opposite of the Buccaneers. They should have won this game, and it really is not as bad as it looks per the final score. Kelsey dropped one pass in the end zone. Kelsey had a pass deflected, another pass on a totally different series in the end zone. So 2 touchdowns that he should have caught, or at least should have been more competitive, and just outright dropped them. They were missing their kicker, Butker. They missed a kick. They went for some weird ass punt fake, whatever, but just a lot of weird stuff that went their way that did not go their way, that makes this score look worse than it really should have been. So not only should they have won this game, but this should have really been more of like a 27-20 game instead of 17-20 game. But again, just looking at the scoreboard, you wouldn't know that. Aside from that, if you look at the teams that the Chiefs have played, they played the Cardinals. The Cardinals have not looked good, so I'm not giving them a whole bunch of credit for that one. But they put up 44 points on the Cardinals. Now again, Cardinals defense is also not that great, but they did what they're supposed to do. You go in there, you beat the hell out of bad teams. You put up 44 points against a team that really, they didn't have a good defense, but they took out a lot of the starters for the Chiefs by the end of that third quarter. So a lot of points getting put up there, and you at least got to kind of give them a nod to say that they know what to do with their offense, at least when they can get things kind of rolling. This Chargers-Chiefs game, now this is a game where they played against a team who actually has a defense. Herbert, if you'll remember, gets hurt in this game, so I don't think he missed more than a play in this game, but and that was towards the fourth quarter, so it's not like he got lost from the first quarter. But the Chiefs put up 27 points on what was a healthy Chargers defense with Bosa in the lineup in this one, and Derwin James. So they showed that they could move the ball on a good offense, on a good defense, put together a good offense, string a couple first downs together, score when they need to. Just Mahomes did what he needed to get the win. So this team should really be 3-0 right now. And on top of that, they have played higher levels of competition. They played the Chargers and the Colts, 2 teams that we do expect to be in the playoffs. Now, the Colts, I know, didn't look good through weeks 1 and 2, but most of the sharp guys were on them last week, and again, they got the win. And I didn't bet them, but I should have bet them last week as well. That's what the algorithm said. We could have got the win, but more importantly, it's like that was almost the wrong side, but you got the win. So just the Chiefs having the higher level of competition, harder strength of schedule, obviously, a better offense that we've seen put up more than 20 points. They've played against a tough defense before. This game may be moved, and I'm almost positive it is going to be moved if you're looking at this hurricane map. The Buccaneers have not given you a whole lot of anything to bank on and say, yeah, this team looks good, this offense is humming now. If you are thinking that the Buccaneers are going to come out and light it up and put up this offensive showing, because that's what I'm hearing. I'm hearing people say that this other shoe's going to drop this coming Sunday against the Chiefs for the Sunday night game. And you got to tell me why, because at this point, it's just blind faith. It's just thinking, well, Brady's going to go Brady. And he's Tom Brady, but there's just not a lot of reason to think that other than you want it to happen. So, like I said, I may not play this one. It's going to really depend on the first game and how the rest of the games line up, because it is a Sunday night game. Like I said, if I look at our game, we win. We look at the algorithms and the points are kind of doing what they're doing, and it seems like we're seeing the field clearly, I'll pull the trigger on this one. But if we lose the first one, and more importantly, if the algorithms are just not at all accurate, like everything is all over the place and the field's not really clear, I'm not going to do it. There's no point in chasing losses at that point, and because at that point it's just a hunch for me at least. So just want to let you know that would be my second pick for this week. If you want to do that, or if you want to follow along with me, and I'll be on Twitter at agsports_21, and you can see what we're doing for the day, or what the picks ended up being, or whatever's going on, and I'll kind of keep you up to date on when we pull the trigger on any new plays. So that's where we're at, guys. Thank you for sticking with me on this long video and really throughout the season. Hopefully we get back on track this week. Thanks again, though. Y'all have a great night. Good luck, and see you soon.